Good afternoon, everybody. If you're wondering if you're in the right place, you are in the CONES webinar, the California Online Naturalist Event Series. So if that helps, we're glad you're joining us. And if you're here by accident, well, why don't you stay for an hour and learn a little bit more about our program? We'd welcome you to do that as well. We'll start in just a minute. We'll give folks just another minute to join in. I think we still got some folks that are connecting. Good to see a nice turnout. Just some housekeeping. We'll be recording this, so just a heads up on that. And we'll start in just a second. All right, let's go ahead. I have 2 minutes after. Let's go ahead and begin. We'll probably have a few people roll in while we're doing these introductory remarks. Welcome to the CONES webinar series. I'm Greg Ira, the director of the UC California Naturalist Program. This series for the University of California's naturalists and climate stewards is designed to connect our folks across the state on topics including natural history, ecology, climate change, and the intersection of pressing human and environmental issues. We're expecting a full house today, and I have a few bits of housekeeping to go over before we begin. This is a Zoom meeting and not a webinar, so please remember to mute your mic and turn off your video just during the presentation portion so we don't have to worry about any background noise and distractions. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please try typing into the chat. And we'll see if we can troubleshoot for you in the background. We'll have time for questions and further discussion. And because we have so many folks on the line, we'll primarily use the chat function to take your questions today. You may want to preface any questions that you submit to our speakers with the word question in all caps, just so that we can sort those out from side conversations that might be taking place. We can get to those questions first. We are, as I mentioned, recording this presentation. It'll be posted online on our YouTube channel in the coming week. So to start us off, again, welcome to CONES. I'd like to start us off by acknowledging that this virtual presentation is taking place throughout the unceded territory of California, home to nearly 200 tribal nations. In particular, I'm speaking to you from Patwin land on the lower Sacramento River. We acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of our various regions. We encourage you to learn which tribal nations are indigenous to the area where you are now living. And one excellent source of information on that is Native Land. We'll be dropping the link to that into the chat for you to explore later. We're here today to explore the initial outcomes of our new Climate Stewards course with the authors of a recent manuscript published in a special issue of the Journal of Sustainability. That manuscript is entitled Adult Climate Change Education, Advances Learning, Self-Efficacy, and Agency for Community Scale Stewardship. These authors happen to be people that you know or probably know fairly well because they are our very own Sarah-Mae Nelson, Dr. Adina Marenlander, and myself. Sarah-Mae is going to be taking the lead on the presentation today. We'll all be here for questions. But I'll start by introducing Sarah-Mae, who is the first author on this new manuscript. Sarah-Mae is our academic coordinator for the program, the California Naturalist Statewide Program's Climate Stewards course. Sarah-Mae started in 2019, just over 3 years ago, as we were completing a strategic plan for the Climate Stewards Initiative. She stepped in to build out the Climate Stewards course, using that strategic plan as a roadmap. She completed a needs assessment from our community of partners and participants. She curated and organized the core curriculum in the Canvas learning management system, and she designed the recommended in-person lessons and activities. Since that time, she's conducted several instructor trainings for our partner organizations, updated our evaluation instrument, including updating the IRB, and has provided ongoing support in numerous forms for our partners. Most recently, she's collaborated on several proposals to expand the Climate Stewards Initiative in other states. She's consulting currently with a multi-state project, and she's currently leading a new collaboration with the California Climate Action Corps, where she is directly delivering as the lead instructor the course to fellows in that new program. On top of all of that, she led the effort to produce the manuscript for the special issue of Journal Sustainability, together with Dr. Marenlander and myself, and get that completed, which was a task in and of itself. Sarah-Mae earned her master's in climate science and policy from Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UC San Diego, and her master's in climate science from in marine biology, her bachelor's in marine biology, I should say, from UC Santa Cruz. She's a member of the National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation, and a member of the National Association for Interpretation and the UN Education, Communication, and Outreach Stakeholders Community. She has a special interest in social emotional resilience and trauma-aware practices and climate change communication and interpretation. So you know more about Sarah-Mae now than you may have in the past. And I'm going to let her take it away and lead us into our presentation today. But as I mentioned earlier, we have all of the authors of the paper with us today. And I'll just say one last thing, that we have a core team that has been moving the Climate Stewards Initiative forward since we completed the strategic plan. The other core team member that's not here is Kate Meadows. She's a Bay Area, California naturalist. So Sarah-Mae, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks so much, Greg. And as Greg said, Adina and Greg were my co-authors, and I could not have done the paper without them. It's been great working with them since day one on this project, and I really appreciate the mission and vision that they set up in the strategic planning process, along with our strategic planning team, to really get this class going, because without the UC Climate Stewards course, I would not have a job. So I really appreciate being able to employ my passion. I come from a background of about 20 years working in natural history interpretation and climate change communication. I really do consider myself a climate change communication specialist. So to be able to take my early career work and really hone it into what became this class was a dream come true. And what we did in this paper was we basically told the story of how climate stewards became climate stewards, and the research from what the participants experienced in the first year of the course. So I'm going to share my screen. I only have a few slides, and those are primarily figures from the paper itself. After I finish sharing my screen, I really want to open this as a conversation with all of us. I see several folks online are some of our brand new certified climate stewards, so thank you all for being here. I see a few of our instructors as well. And this would not have been possible without those incredible instructors, our incredible partner organizations, and the incredible students who took the course. So as Greg mentioned, this is the title of our paper. It's always interesting to put together a title because you want it to be captivating for others to read, but you also want it to tell a little bit of what's already there. And really, we were able to find out some pretty amazing things through the work of our first year partners. So this next slide is a list of who those partners were, and just some basic information on how we got the data from the class. So right now, in March of 2022, we have approximately 27 trained partner organizations, although not all of them have offered a class to date. So we had these 7 partner organizations that offered classes in the first year, and so that was the data pool that we had to draw from for our data analysis for this manuscript. And as you can see, we had some organizations that taught 2 classes, some that taught 1, and they ranged across the state. And that was really important for us. So we had different demographics of people who were taking the course. It wasn't all Northern California. It wasn't all urban. They were really spread out over an area that gave us a glimpse into what potentially different people from different perspectives were experiencing when they came into this class. One of the questions that we ask, and if you have taken our end of course survey, whether you are a California naturalist or a UC climate steward, or potentially both, as I know some of you are, one of the things we want to know is why. Why have you come to this class? Why are you taking this class? And this is a question that we allow folks to pick as many answers to as they would like. One of the things that you'll see is we do find that there is a kind of a top 4 answers that come rising up. And those really are to learn about how to talk about climate change, to learn about solutions to climate change, to learn about the climate science, and to learn about community resilience. And really awesomely, those things are what we teach a lot of in the class. And so this data that I'm about to share with you showcases how those motivations potentially connect to with the end of class experiences and learning that the students have received. And if you see me flinch a little bit, I have a cat who is here by my chair, and he is trying to get my attention. So he is there. It's not you, it's him. So we used a set of predetermined questions that were put together by Cornell University, and they are called the Devise Strands. And they were put together through a national grant project so that people could come together and use a standard set of questions to find out more information across types of education. So how can we see, was this educational program similar or different from this educational program? Did we have success in this area for one versus success in another area for something else? So we use this standard set of questions to arrive at ideas for why were people taking this class beyond their stated motivations, and what did they potentially have coming into the class, and what did they potentially leave with after they had spent 40 hours with our instructors and their learning cohort. So the first thing that we wanted to learn a little bit more about is this idea of, are they learning climate stewardship? Is it important to them to learn climate stewardship? What did they come to the class with potentially before the class, knowing about climate stewardship, and what did they leave with after? So on all of these figures, the color coding is the same. So the dark bar is what they knew before the class, and the light bar is what they knew after the class. And when you look at these figures, you'll see it says in 150 or potentially some other number if we had fewer people that answered that question. N simply means the number of people who answered that question. So it's to give you an idea of the sample size. How many responses did we get? And generally with science, the more people you have answering a question, the more reliable we consider that data to be, because it helps kind of average out, and we don't have as many extremes at either end that could potentially make the data say something that we wouldn't really expect it to say. So what you can see here is that all of these responses that the students who took the course had a significant difference in their understanding and learning of climate stewardship after they took the course. And this is really exciting because the course is UC Climate Stewards. And the idea of the course, our mission is to increase community and ecosystem resilience in California to the impacts of climate change. And so the fact that we're seeing learning about climate stewardship happen in the class is really exciting, and it helps us know that we are on the right track. Learning is all well and good, but when you learn something, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to do something about what you learned. And so our next set of questions wanted to find out, well, do people feel like they can do something about climate stewardship? Do they feel like they can take action and make a difference? And that is the idea of self-efficacy. I can take an action and I can make a difference. And so these questions, again, get to that idea of, do I feel like myself, I can do something? And you can see, again, the before in dark, the light in after, and there is a significant change in all of these. And if you look between the previous slide, learning about climate stewardship, at that difference between the dark bar and the light bar, and then you look at the difference here, you'll see that the difference is even greater. So people are feeling significantly that they are able to do something after taking the class. There is something about the class that is empowering them to feel like they can make a difference. Our next question was this idea of environmental agency. Now, that word agency is a little bit high level, I guess. It's something that we use a lot in social science, and it basically means that if I am engaged in this activity, will something change? Can I be an agent of change related to this? And so we see that again, the dark bar before, the light bar after, we are seeing a statistically significant change for people from before the class to after the class. But as compared to the slide before, you'll see that the difference here is a little bit smaller. And that is somewhat to be expected, because those of you who come to the California Naturalist class or to the Climate Stewards class already are connected to the environment in some way. You are usually already taking steps to do something to help the environment, to take action on climate change. And in fact, some people who come to the Climate Stewards class see that as taking an action to do something about climate change. So it is significant, but it's maybe not quite as significant from before to after as some of the other questions we asked. Now, this next slide that I'm about to show you is the one that I personally am most excited about, because I am a climate change communication specialist. And one of the things we really worked hard to do within the Climate Stewards class was to help people learn how to communicate about climate change. How do I talk to other people about this? And this is where we see the most significant changes within people who took the course. The dark bars before, the light bars to after, we see a very, very significant change from before to after. And this is telling us that there was something in the course that allowed people to feel like, yes, I can talk about climate change with my friends and family. I can listen to others. I can connect to others. I can communicate using practices related to social emotional resilience and trauma awareness. I can communicate about local impacts. I can talk about vulnerability and adaptive capacity. And that is probably the most inspiring thing that I get from this data that we've had. Because one of the things that we are most hoping that the climate stewards will do is to work within their communities, to extend what they've learned by interacting with their fellow community members, to spread the word that yes, we can do something, and here are some of the actions that you can take. Now, one of the actions that the students who take the class are already doing is their Capstone Project. The Capstone Project is the first bit of service that our naturalists or our stewards do as part of the course itself, and they often extend that capstone work beyond the end of the course. And so when we look at volunteer service from that first year of the Climate Stewards class, we see that within the 6 categories of service, we see an interesting spread across the topics that students were engaging with on their capstone projects. So whether it's conservation or restoration work, education or interpretation, community resilience and adaptation, you can see the number of hours there that were devoted by 149 certified stewards over the course of that study period, and then the percent of the total that that comes into. And this is really exciting that we can start to see, where are you making a difference? What are the topics that you're making a difference in? How are you impacting your communities for ecosystem resilience as well as community resilience? And then one of the things we did that was just a great way to visualize like beyond these very large categories, the work that you're doing, is we made a word cloud of the capstone projects. And so these are some of the most commonly used terms from Capstone Project titles from that first year of the Climate Stewards class. So you can see that they range across the board from education to working with landscapes and agriculture to working with stewardship and air quality, looking at fire and forests, the oceans. It's really just everywhere across the board that our stewards are engaging in these practices. And it's so exciting to see this. And I had a lot of fun putting this Wordle together, looking at all of the titles of your capstone projects and just how remarkable the work that you are all doing in this time. And again, I'm just looking at the climate stewards for the first year. I haven't gotten to do this sort of analysis for all of the California naturalist projects that are also going on alongside this that have similar impacts in all of these areas. So this answered a lot of really cool questions for us. It helped us get an idea of what our stewards were gathering from the class, but it also left a lot more questions because I can't say when they did this, they learned this topic, it made this happen, because that was not the kind of study that we did. We used the end of course survey data to get the impressions that the stewards had from before the class and after the class, but I can't directly say this activity promoted this response. So what do we do next? Well, we will continue our end of course survey questions. It's super important that you answer those, and this is the sort of thing that we can do with that. We can see where are things going, where are things succeeding, how can we connect with our stewards, what are they really looking at, experiencing, engaging with. But we are working on now a new formative evaluation. And what does that mean? Well, we want to be able to answer the question, what made those communication skills improve? Was it a particular portion of the class? Was it interacting with each other? What made people feel that they had agency to take action? Was it participating in the climate resilience assessment? We don't have the answers, but we would like to have some answers. So we have a new type of evaluation we're hoping to start soon that will use our end of course surveys. It'll use some interviews as well as some experience and activity logs that our upcoming participants will be doing. And we also have the new volunteer portal. And that new volunteer portal allows us to look at your capstone projects and the volunteer work that you're doing, those service hours that you put in. And it helps us tell the story of where do our stewards and naturalists go after they finish the class. Because we really see the California Naturalist certification and the Climate Steward certification as the entryway, the gate to what's next, that community and ecosystem resilience. And we see that capstone project as the start to a new adventure that you will continue on with your service hours over time, and that we'll be able to tell the story of how you are all making impacts to your communities across California. So this is kind of what we're thinking of as next steps and where we go from here. And I'm going to now stop talking, and I'm not sure if questions have come in. Elliot will be able to tell me that in a moment. But we want to basically have a conversation. What was interesting to you? Do you have questions about this? What might you want to find out? But before I turn off this shared screen, I do just want to share our acknowledgments from the end of the paper. We could not have done this work without the rest of the California Naturalist team, all of the instructors that have been part of this, our science review committee who has supported us along the entire way, and all of the participants that have taken the class and chosen to engage in their communities this way. So I'm going to turn off my screen share now, if I can find it here. And yeah. I guess I should, before we start taking questions, just turn it over for a moment to Greg or Adina if there was something I missed that you would like to emphasize about the work that we've done to date.
I don't have anything to add. Probably when the questions start coming in, we can go over some things, but I think you covered all of the high points.
Yeah, Sarah-Mae, nice job. Great to see it all rolling out and great to see everyone interested and looking forward to questions. There's some stats nerds out there. The bars that were on all of Sarah-Mae's figures are our standard errors. Something the reviewer asked us to put on because it's often thought that like if something is different beyond one standard error, then it's significant. But in this case, the significance of the effects that Sarah-Mae was presenting when she'd say it was also significant are more related to the pairs, the pairing of an individual's response before the course and after the course. So the actual statistics when Sarah-Mae was referring to significance have more to do with whether each individually significantly advanced given the variance across all individuals. So anyway, nice to have those bars up there, but I didn't want people to think that if the bars overlapped, that didn't mean that there was not a significant difference. There actually are significant differences across the board, but the bars represent the whole group's score as you moved and improved. And that probably just made a huge mess of it.
No, it's always good to clarify.
If you're very interested in that. But just seeing all those black bars, I wanted you to know that's the group standard error of everyone's response as compared before the class and everyone's response after the class. But what we really cared about was how all individuals changed before and after.
Thank you. I just saw a question from James Manley. Has this survey generated any thoughts about making this standard/mandatory continuing education for K through 12 educators? That is an interesting question. We just published the data last month. We have started to get emails, outreach from other folks who are encountering the manuscript and wanting to learn more about it. We don't necessarily target K through 12 educators as part of the California Naturalist program, either with the California Naturalist course or the Climate Stewards course. They are, welcome to teach, to become instructors. But we have had an interesting number of educators who have indicated interest. And I also can say that the organization 10 Strands, that's STRANDS, they are working very closely with the Department of Education in the state of California to elevate climate change education within K through 12 educators to make sure that what the students are getting is accurate and appropriate. So our survey particularly, we have not connected to K through 12 educators, but there are other organizations that are working quite closely with them that are engaging similar principles. So what makes Climate Stewards different than most other climate education courses out there right now are the emphasis on social emotional resilience, trauma-aware practices, and research-based climate change communication practices. And so, again, I've been in conversation with folks from 10 Strands as well as the Clean Network, the national, there's an organization that's working to promote a national framework for climate change education in the United States. And I've worked with them putting the framework together before they presented it to the Biden administration. So this paper, not directly related, but the work that we are doing within the CalNat program and the Climate Stewards course is having impressions on the people doing that work.
And James, I'm just sending you a name of a contact person at CDE that you could also follow up with your specific question, as she'll know more about what's happening informally.
I think there's also, since CalNat got started, I think we have, and Greg's done a great job with Project Learning Tree as being like resources for teachers. we are an informal education effort, but I can't agree that we have a huge offering for formal educators. Both with California Naturalist, I feel, because a lot of people have told me that the educators aren't necessarily comfortable with outdoor education. So there's just getting everyone out and observing nature. And then, of course, climate change is a huge focus for standards. And in California is used for achieving many different standards. So I think there's room to grow there for what our instructors can offer educators. If they take these certification classes, how can we help them to more readily bring what they learn back to the classroom in the form of lesson plans and things like that? So it's something that we have tried to partner in different ways. And Greg knows more about Project Learning Tree as a partnership that allows us to do some of that.
I'll say there was another question that came into the chat from Colin Barrows, asking if we are accounting for response biases, and if we had any thoughts about other evaluation measures that would get at actual effectiveness versus kind of self-reported effectiveness. So this is our survey, our instrument was looking at retrospective pre and post observations as indicated by the respondent themselves. So it's a good question. I don't know if Sarah-Mae or Adina wants to take a stab at that one first.
I can definitely talk about bias. So thanks, Cameron. We didn't test for it, any kind of specific demographic bias or others. We do share about the sample. And we do note that there are some classes that have much higher response rates than other classes. And I know Sarah-Mae is working to bump that up so that we don't get geographic biases around which programs have good response rates and which don't. As far as, I think what's really nice about working with Cindy Zeker and doing a deeper dive in evaluation that Sarah-Mae mentioned is that it's going to be a little bit more about what the mechanisms are that might be leading to these changes. So for instance, which units, which even exercises may have shifted the individuals. For instance, communication skills, that's a little easier to figure out, but things like shifts in identity and efficacy, I think those are harder to figure out which exercises and which elements of the course. And also, I think it's really hard to understand where people are at before the class and during the class, the other interventions that they might be experiencing. They could be reading a really interesting article in the New York Times, and that shifted them in the 10 weeks that they were also taking climate stewards. So those kinds of things, like where people are at with their content knowledge and experience before they enter the program and what they experience during the program, I think are much more elucidated in interviews. And I'm very excited that we'll be embarking on these. So I see this as a preliminary first scan of what Sarah-Mae put together, which was amazingly, I mean, she got so many of you on board and got so much information very, very quickly. And it's nice to see sort of a first scan, but I think it's generated more questions than probably it's answered.
Yeah, I think that's the case almost always. Anytime you do a research paper, you're hypothesizing something and trying to get some answers, and then you end up with so many more based on the results that you ended up with. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to continuing the research with a formative evaluation. Like seeing those changes in communication skills. I have my own thoughts as to what kind of led to that, but really to do those interviews, to do those tracking logs where students will be looking at their experience from before they take the class to taking the class to after taking the class, will really be able to get close insights on some things that we can only make conjectures about at this time. But I'm really excited about those next steps. And as always, we'll continue to share the information with you. The primary data pool for this group was about 150 individual responses that we had collected by November of 2021. Since then, we've had more stewards graduate, and the more responses we have, the better our kind of outlook and research can be, the analysis. And so over the next year or two, going into this next evaluation, adding more and more responses. And also some of what our external evaluator will be doing is doing some interviews with our alumni who have already graduated that were part of this initial research pool, so we can have some reflections post-course on their responses and their experiences. So. Yeah.
I also chime in on the interviews, Sarah-Mae, also, and I think Cameron knows this too, everyone appreciates the role of the instructors. And so we'll be getting some interviews with all of our instructors, kind of understanding where they're coming from, what they can offer, because it's different depending on the instructor, their approaches and what they're delivering, how they're delivering, things like that. So we're going to learn a lot more from our hopefully willing instructors as we talk to them in depth about their experience.
I want to make sure we get to some of the other questions on this one. I did want to just clarify that was from Colin. And
sorry. So, hi, Colin. Sorry. First name.
No worries. And then I don't know, Colin, if you were also thinking in your question about whether we were looking beyond their understanding or knowledge, their behavior change, which we capture mostly through the volunteer portal, as Sarah-Mae mentioned. But also we're looking at this community resilience assessment tool, as you know, and whether we're able to actually see condition change. Now that's much further down the road. You won't see any change in a year or even 2 years probably, but we're hoping there may be some other instruments that we use that might help supplement what we've used in this initial study. So thanks for that question. I want to go to Luke's question. He talks about the different kind of approaches that we use in the course, and it gets to that question, and I think Sarah-Mae alluded to this, as to whether or not the study evaluated the effectiveness or reinforced the value of any of those approaches. And if not, which is pretty much what we've said, how do we seek to possibly measure that in the future? And I think you've alluded to some of that.
Yeah, Luke, one of the things is we did not explicitly test for that in our end of course surveys. Our hypothesis is that this was a huge contributor to it. And in the article itself, that was part of our proposal, that using these practices that are different is kind of what led to some of these gains that were statistically significant. What we're hoping to do in the formative evaluation with the interviews and some other types of questioning is to find out why. So we know that people felt an increase in self-efficacy, but we don't know why. Again, with agency and communication skills. So we hope to elucidate that more. And the other thing that's really exciting is our reviewers, so the peer reviewers who looked at this to, validate whether this was a significant and accurate contribution to the field of science. This was a peer-reviewed article. They came back saying that they thought this was an important step, that more people needed to be thinking about these aspects of climate education in terms of social emotional aspects and trauma-aware aspects as well. So that was really exciting. And several of the people that have reached out to us as a result of reading this manuscript are, thinking in similar ways, that they want to start to employ more of these activities in the work that we're doing, the work that they're doing. And so they're asking us about our experience from our work. And the last thing I'll say, Luke, is that part of my work with the National Climate Education Framework was making sure that social, emotional, and trauma-aware aspects were included in that. And they were, which is super exciting. And we are really drawing from what's been learned in the public health and public education spheres as the impact of those we're using it as a proxy to our work. So it was initially done in public health and public education. More research is being done right now in terms of trauma-aware practices and social-emotional resilience in environmental education, but not a ton has been done in climate right now. So the research that we'll be doing with our formative evaluation will be some of the first, we're hoping, that we'll be able to establish and get published and put that out there as making those connections. So fingers crossed for that. I see another, oh yes, I will post that. Oh, and Estrella responded, great Estrella, thank you so much for that. And then, yep, the work that 10 Strands is doing. And then, oh yeah, Adina just mentioned another advantage of having the paper out and the early available data is that we were able to include the information on what we are as a program. We're new, this is the first year that we're out there. And as Greg mentioned at the very beginning, we are we just contracted with the state of California to directly deliver the UC Climate Stewards course to the California Climate Action Corps Fellows. So I'm actively involved in that right now. I'm also actively at the moment working with Washington State University on an NSF grant that they received around working with climate change communication with underserved groups. That are looking at Latinx groups in Washington and Utah, as well as indigenous groups in Utah and Alaska, and then rural women forest owners in Pennsylvania. So the grantees have gone through our instructor training, and they are looking at adapting our curriculum to those audiences. So that is a process we're going through right now to see, does this work in some different audience types? So it's really exciting, the conversations that we're having, and it's thanks to you. It's thanks to you who are our partners, who are our instructors, who are our students that have allowed us to learn all of these different things. So Greg, I see that you just posted a question in the chat.
Yeah, I'm just curious if either of you would want to comment on how you think our partner organizations that are either currently offering the course or thinking about offering the course might use this information to move things forward or to continue support for that course moving forward. Adina?
A good question, Greg. I think it could be quite useful if people putting grants in or trying to put a pitch forward to us, maybe just a sponsor for your scholarship funds, that this can make a difference for how people are identifying and feeling empowered and feeling ready to help their communities with resilience. So it'll just support the justification for offering the course by your organization and the power that it might have for the participants who can join the class.
Yeah, another way to say what Adina just said is people always ask, well, why is this better than whatever else is out there? And now we have data that shows, well, when people take this class, this is what results, which is great evidence for why potentially you can work with your board to teach the class. Or potentially work with, as Adina said, a grant to maybe acquire funding to offer the class gratis to maybe underserved communities in your own area. We're seeing that students are really, they're coming out of the class with changes that are positive in making a difference for community and ecosystem resilience to climate impacts. And at the moment, we don't know why, but we know that it's happening. So that's what's the really exciting part. And just for me, teaching the class right now, I wrote the class, but this is the first time I'm teaching it to the California Climate Action Corps Fellows. And just to see people having those aha moments, making those connections, connecting to each other, learning about things that they maybe hadn't ever thought to even think about before in terms of especially the trauma-aware practices that we teach. It's really amazing to see the difference that it can make in people's lives. I see another question for Luke. Do you have a hyperlink that would allow us to share the data analysis with stakeholders we speak with? So do you mean, Luke, do you mean the paper itself? We have a link to the paper. It is an open access paper. So anyone who wants to read it can access it freely online. And I think Elliot can drop that link in the chat. Oh yeah, and then Greg just uploaded the PDF version link as well. Yeah. Oh, and then Elizabeth's asking to repost the main categories to document the Climate Stewards volunteer hours. And yes, Elizabeth, I can do that right now. Thanks for that question.
And I believe in our new volunteer portal, it automatically assigns the options in the dropdown to one of those 6 categories. So that process should be streamlined. You should be able to see it once you've selected the type of service that you've provided. It should also show which category of service we've kind of placed that in. Now, you also have the opportunity to create a new type if it's significantly different from those choices that are on our list. But please take a minute to take a look at the new volunteer portal when you're entering your hours. Explore it a little bit. There's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. It's a very powerful tool now. And if you have any questions at all, there's a way you can submit a help request within the system, and one of us will get back to you as soon as we can on that. So I think you're all going to enjoy the new system, and hope you've all gotten a chance to go in and take a look, and we'll continue to record your hours into the future, because that's really going to help us look at those next levels of impact that look at behaviors and other things that are happening post-course. And Sarah-Mae's dropped the categories in there so you can see those. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the volunteer portal too is going to allow us to capture even more data about what you are all doing. The activities you're doing, where you're doing them, we really are hoping to talk more in the coming months and year about how really the Capstone Project is just the beginning of service work related to community and ecosystem resilience in Climate Stewards and the CalNAC courses. We have some students who have already taken their Capstone projects over the years on incredible journeys and have had amazing things from a passionate idea related to their project. And it's so exciting to see the work that you're doing because, that's really what the Capstone projects are about. It's your passion. How can you apply the principles of the CalNAC class or the Climate Stewards class to what matters to you, and then make it as a service to your community? So it's really exciting to see all of this. And I think my favorite, and I will speak for the rest of my team and say that probably all of our favorite times is when we get invited to the capstone presentations at the end of your courses, and we get to see the incredible work that you're doing. Like, it has sometimes made me cry or given me chills from the stuff that you are all doing. So it's super exciting to experience that. And coming up later this month, I know that we get to go to a few more classes that are graduating. So if there's instructors here, know that we like to be invited. And I'm hoping sooner than later, when we get back to in-person classes, that I'll actually get to see some of you in person, because I haven't been able to meet all of you in real life yet. But speaking of real life, I'll quickly share that we are planning at this time for our next California Naturalist and Climate Stewards instructor trainings that will be happening in the fall to be in person. So if you are a California Naturalist instructor who's been thinking about becoming a Climate Stewards instructor, we would love you to join us in the fall, and we'll be making some announcements about all of that relatively soon.
There was one other question. I don't know if this just came in or if it was addressed about whether there will be funding for Climate Stewards classes in other languages.
So here's an interesting thing. We don't have funding for that at the moment, but Pamela Burns, one of our newest California Naturalist staff, discovered something this past week that I'm actually going to be talking with the team about today. And that is in the Canvas Learning Management System, what we use to teach the Climate Stewards course. They recently, by recently I mean the end of 2021, integrated the Microsoft Immersive Reader that allows online content to be instantaneously translated into about 26 different languages. So we are going to look at that and see, is there something we can do with that to help kind of allow our participants who are more comfortable in their first language to experience the classes in a different way. And, you know, it is kind of the golden apple that we are all seeking as to how can we make this content available to more people in the language they are most comfortable with. And it is a discussion that we have had, but at the moment, we do not currently have funding for that, although we do have some instructors who are interested in furthering that work, especially in Spanish language.
One thing I'll just add is that part of the design of both our Climate Stewards and California Naturalist course revolves around co-design and working with local partners like many of your organizations to take the core curriculum and tailor it to the local context and local culture. And if that means offering the course as a bilingual course, as one of our CalNat courses has been done in Riverside County, then that would be an example of us using our delivery approach, which is working with partner organizations from communities who deliver that course locally and letting them co-design the course to make it more culturally appropriate or relevant. So there is a kind of built-in mechanism. It only goes so far, but I'll just give you an example. Adina's been working with the California Tribal College, tailoring a California Naturalist course to their specific audience and their interests and their needs and their priorities. And that's just a huge example. Elliot is working with an Indigenous high school in the LA area, and they're working on tailoring a Climate Stewards course to that population. So there's a mechanism to do that. It's not perfect, but that's the tool that we have right now, and we're continuing to build on that. I see we're coming up on the end of our call. I want to make sure if there are any last questions, we get a chance to take maybe one final question. All right. If not, I want to thank Sarah-Mae and Adina for joining us today. Thank all of you for participating in this webinar and hopefully some of the others. We'll try to continue this monthly webinar series as long as there's interest. We really want to hear your thoughts about the webinar. The link to the evaluation has been put in the chat, so please click on that now so that it opens up on your browser. So after we close this call, it'll be there for you to complete. So we want to get that feedback, so please take time to do that. And finally, we hope you have on your calendar the 2022 California Naturalist Program Statewide Conference in Lake Tahoe, October 7th through 9th. If you're an instructor, add the 10th. We'll have a separate instructor meeting on the 10th. We hope you can stay and join us. We've got engaging speakers lined up. We've got fantastic field trips. There's going to be plenty of opportunities for our naturalists and our climate stewards to reconnect, reinvigorate, re-energize, and just basically shake off the last 2 years. Okay, so hope to see you then. More information is on the website. Thanks again, everybody, for joining. And thanks again, Sarah-Mae and Adina.
Yeah, thank you, Greg, Adina, and everybody here. Really couldn't do this without you, so appreciate you all.